now let's concentrate on the collar, and we want to do some sculpting on this, but I wanted to show you something that you could do in ZBrush if you want to do some changes to the structure of your objects. So in this case, let's say that there's something that we wanted to add to this underlying structure that we didn't do in Maya. Instead of going back to Maya and changing it and then re-importing, which you could certainly do, you could also change it here in ZBrush using ZModeler. So let's go ahead and I'm going to just solo this object and turn on the polyframe. And let's say that we want to add sort of a trough that kind of comes up and around. So kind of an inset line that goes all the way around. Let's go into our brushes and let's go to ZModeler. So ZModeler is context based. So whatever you happen to be hovering over, you have different selections and actions that you can do. And so you'll get a lot of feedback here on the screen as you hover over each of those. And so let's say we want to add an edge loop. So we're going to hover over the edge loop, any of the edge loops, hold down space bar, and this lets us choose what action we want to do. So we could delete edge loops, we can move them, but what I want to do is insert an edge loop. And down here under target, you can either insert multiple edge loops or single edge loop. Let's go ahead and do single edge loop. So now when we click on any edge loops, that's the action that we're going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and add an edge loop here. And let's add one right next to it. Okay. And so now what I want to do is extrude in this loop of faces. As we hover over a polygon and we hit spacebar, this will let us choose an action for polygons. So in this case, we want to extrude polygons, and we want to extrude not a single polygon, but a poly loop. And so whatever we do is going to happen on a loop of polygons. And here we can choose the modifiers that we want to set. We'll go ahead and leave those as is. So now when we hover over this polygon and we click and drag, you can see it's now extruding in that poly loop. I don't want to go quite so far. So maybe something like that. Okay, and you can see it did it all the way around because that's a loop. Now, when we smooth this, I want this to be nice and hard edged. And so going back to our edges, I don't have to change anything because the edge context action is still set. So I can go back in and add an edge loop here and here, and we're good to go. Okay, so now we want to sculpt on this. So let's go back to our standard brush for a second. And before we do that, we have to subdivide this. We need to get enough polygons in here to be able to subdivide it. So I'm going to hit Control D, and you can see it keeps subdividing each quad into 4 more quads. Okay, you can also tell the number of polygons if you hover over the object. Let's go ahead and do this one more time. And let's turn off our polyframe. And so by doing a stroke, you can see kind of the resolution. You can see it's not really what we want yet. We'll have to subdivide again until we get to the point where we get some detail that's good quality detail that we want. So I think that's pretty good. You can always subdivide again if you need to. But what I want to do is start to block things out. So I want there to be sort of a couple of feathers or wings here. And so I'm going to go to Damien's standard brush and go to stroke, and we'll just set our radius up to something like that. And I'm going to define the edges of these wings. And so this is a good spot for you to kind of create what you want to create. I'm going to have my own design, but the idea is that it's a carved wooden collar or cowl that this guy's wearing, kind of ornamental. So it could be, could have relief carvings about the history of his culture, things like that. And so the things that I carve into it doesn't have to be what you carve. The idea is just to do kind of the same type of detail. So I'm going to say that there's one that's kind of coming like this and then one in front of it. So I'm going to start by kind of drawing back to this trough. And you can see here, even then, we're getting a little bit of jagginess on the edges. So I'm going to subdivide one more time. And then from the edge here, I'm going to actually come across and create the edge of this wing. And then over like that. Okay, so this is one, and then this is one that's kind of overlapping. Let's go back and get to our standard brush, but I still want to use the lazy mouse stroke. All right, and so what I want to do is create a line, kind of the stem that comes all the way back here. We can go back in and kind of smooth that out. I'll do the same thing here. Kind of smooth that out. Then I want to go back and get the Damien's standard brush, and I'm going to just come in and create these sort of lines coming out from the side here. And I want to do that with kind of a smaller draw size. I want to take the focal shift down a little bit so that it's a little bit more sharp. Take the intensity down. And we want to do it on both of these. And I'm going to kind of alternate whether I'm coming from the edges like that or from the center, kind of back